So, what is the Grape Explorer talking about today? Well, one of my favorite areas in the wine world is Champagne. And Champagne is a fascinating part of France as far as its historical perspective and how it's evolved into the market today. But Champagne is, of course, a sparkling wine. But the method is highly protected by each grower in Champagne. So every house has its own particular styles. And what's fascinating about Champagne is the different regions, and the soil composition is completely different from different areas of Champagne. But the grapes remain the same. By law, Champagne has to be made with Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and also Pinot Meunier, which is a very small, little tiny, if you want to say cross cousin to Pinot Noir, but they usually use a small percentage of it. Some producers might even put a little more just to make a little different style. But usually that is the style of a vintage Champagne, unless it's called Blanc de Blanc, which means it's 100% of the white grapes and not red grapes. But what we have here is an interesting array of what I consider to be some of the finest books written on the subject of Champagne. One of the first books that I ever got, the one on the left, is called Sparkling Wine. This was written by Sheldon and Pauline Wasserman, and if some of the people who love Italian wines remember correctly, Sheldon and Pauline Wasserman put together Italy's Noble Red Wines, quite a mammoth study of Italian wines, grapes, regions. But one of the other books that they did write on was the subject of Champagne and sparkling wine. They put actually an interesting book together explaining not only the houses of Champagne and the history of Champagne, but they also talked about areas of the United States, sparkling wine production in Spain, and also in Italy, as well as Australia. So it's really a global book of sparkling wine, and of course a high emphasis on French Champagne. And also they do a lot of sparkling wines in France as well. The second book to the right of the sparkling wines is a book called Champagne by Serena Sutcliffe. Serena Sutcliffe is a very interesting woman, British wine writer. She's a master of wine and also the head of Sotheby's International Fine Wine Auction House. And one of her passions is Champagne. If you asked her what the favorite thing for her to enjoy is, she will tell you Champagne. And so she put together what's called the history and the character of the world's most celebrated wine. And her book on Champagne really goes into detail all of the houses of Champagne, explains the philosophy of all of the important marquee producers of Champagne, as well as some smaller growers as well. And then the book to the right of Serena Sutcliffe's book is a wine book called, appropriately, Champagne. And it's written by a gentleman named Thomas Stevenson. Thomas Stevenson's an interesting writer. He's also a British wine writer, but he's considered the leading authority of Champagne. He wrote 23 books on the subject, but he also he was the first wine book to win 4 literary awards, which was an amazing accomplishment for anybody writing wine books at the time. So again, Thomas Stevenson, his book on Champagne is a must for anybody to find out all the historical perspectives of Champagne and what to look for from a particular house in Champagne, but also how to serve Champagne. He also goes into detail about wine and food, and a fascinating study of Champagne. And the final book to the right is a very interesting book. This is a book that highlights not only Champagne, but the Loire Valley and Alsace as well. I picked this book up about, I'd say, a good 25 years ago, but very interesting reading, goes into detail about all the Champagne houses, their history, when they started, goes into detail today about the trade, how many bottles are actually sold per annum of each house. This one is written by Humbrecht and Duker, and it's all of these books are available on Amazon. I looked them up. They're all quite reasonable. They're hard copy, which is nice, you know, if you like to put books onto the coffee table and something to talk about as a conversation piece for guests that come over your house.